Hi friends, it's Miss Nikki. We're going to do another quick lesson. This time we're going to be having a look at identifying differences in fabrics. Okay, I've got lots of different fabrics here we're going to have a look at together. And we need to learn this because it's important to know the difference in different fabrics when we're sewing. We need to be able to choose the right fabric for the right project. It will just help sewing be a lot easier. We'll have a lot more success if we're choosing the right fabrics. Okay, so there's lots of different fabrics. We can have denims and cottons and flannelette and all different sorts of fabrics, but all of those can be put into two categories. We can have wovens and knits. Okay, so first of all, we're going to have a look at our knit fabric. So let's move some of these to the side and let's have a look at this. This is my version of an exaggerated knit fabric. So this is one that I've made up for you. So knit fabrics are made by knitting yarn or thread to make a fabric. So just like if you were going to knit a jumper, with knitting needles, it's all looped around. So it's just one long piece of yarn knitted together to make a fabric, okay? And if you look very closely at the fabric, you're going to see sort of like braid-like patterns running down. So, and you can have a look on your own clothes. You might see your school shirt, or I've got a t-shirt here. And if you have a look at the fabric, you'll be able to see a very small version of those braids. Can you see that? And if you have a look on your school shirt at home, or if you're wearing a t-shirt now, or if there's one in your cupboard, you'd be able to pull it out and have a look, and you will see little braid-like lines through the fabric. So let's have a look at what we've got here, our information. And you can see in the image how that yarn is looped around. There's the one piece of yarn looped around and it makes the fabric up. Okay, so let's read this together. So knit fabrics are made by knitting yarn or thread to make the fabric, much like if you were to knit a jumper with knitting needles. So just like this one here. But the fabric's been made on a knitting machine. So these ones here are actually made on a knitting machine. It's got much smaller needles and much thinner yarn or thread. So here we go. This one here has been made on a knitting machine. Okay, so if you look closely, you'll see the interlocking loops and they look like the tiny braids. All right, can you see those little loops? That is just the one yarn woven, and that raw edge here. So on knits, the raw edge doesn't fray like it does with other types of fabric. So it just stays like this. So it's quite easy to finish off projects using a knit because there's no finishing of the seams that's absolutely needed. Okay. All right, let's have a look at our next category, which is the woven fabrics. So this is the sheet that you'll have. So the woven fabrics are made by weaving pieces of thread in a crisscross pattern. All right, so just made by weaving the thread in a cross-shaped pattern. So lots of threads in woven fabric run this way, and lots of threads are running this way. So the thread fibers cross over each other at right angles. So here we go, you can see all the threads are going over and down, and it's woven together almost like a basket stitch. Okay, so if I fray those edges a little bit, you will actually be able to see all the threads that are running down this way and all the threads that are running down this way. Okay, and they're crossing over. So these woven fabrics, or they're usually cottons or cotton blends that we use at school, they're great for sewing because they don't actually have a lot of stretch. So if you were to pull them along those lines of grain or lines of thread, they don't have a lot of stretch. So that means that when you're sewing, they're not going to shift out of place too much while you're sewing. So you're going to get some nice, stable fabric to work with. Now, the only thing about having this woven edge is it does fray quite easily. So when you're working with it and putting your pattern together, the edges do fray quite easily. So we need to finish our edges off when we're using these fabrics. We need to use a zigzag or an overlocker just to stop this from happening so that our finished project doesn't all unravel. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at telling the difference between different types of fabric. Okay, so I've got two things here. The first one is a pillowcase. I've got a nice little pillowcase here and a t-shirt. All right, and we're going to see if we can work out whether or not they're wovens or whether or not they're knits by having a look at the fabric. Okay, so let's have a close look at our t-shirt. And we're going to see whether or not we can see any braid-like lines or if we think it's a cross shape. So let's have a look at our fabric. Does it look to you like it's a crossed weave or if it's looking like a braid? So I think I can see a braid line running down this way. And I'm going to have a bit of a check because knit fabric has got some stretch. So let's have a bit of a pull on the fabric. Oh yes. And see if it's got some stretch. Yes, it's got lots of great stretch in that fabric, running both ways, doesn't it? So if it's stretching and has braid lines, that will make it a knit fabric. So let's have a look at our pillowcase. I wonder if it will be the same. Let's have a look at the fabric and see whether or not that looks like it is a braid or a weave. Does it look like the threads have been braided together, or does it look like they cross over each other in right angles? So I think I can see threads running this way and running this way. Let's have another look. Let's see if there's got any stretch in this fabric. Oh, no stretch. So no stretch in the fabric, and the fabric has got lines of threads running in right angles to each other, weaving in and out. So I think that one is a woven fabric. Okay, how about for your learning activity, I'd like you to have a bit of a walk around your house and see what sort of fabrics you can find in your house and have a bit of a look at them. So you might have a look at some cushions on your lounge. You might have a look at your curtains or your bed sheets, or you might look at some of your clothes or your socks or your pajamas and see whether or not you can figure out what kind of fabric it is, if it's a knit or a woven fabric.